What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here for another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Of course, sounding off on all things post the Sean McDermott era, the Buffalo Bills brass, Terry Pegula, of course, and Bills president of football ops, Brandon Beane, talked to the media today. We got a lot to discuss tonight on the show. This show is pre-recorded. It's about 6:45. I just got out of a practice here, and I wanted to hop on here as soon as I got back. And I wanted to just give my take on everything today and then go about the rest of my night and just chill out because I am honestly fried from this situation, covering it, following it as closely as I am. I was on WIVB Channel 4 yesterday discussing the firing of one Sean McDermott with Trina Catterson. I want to take the time out to thank her for having me on and giving me a little bit of her time. And she was great to talk to about the aftermath of this decision, which is a massive decision within the history of One Bills Drive, within those walls of One Bills Drive. And that's why Terry Pegula felt like he could finally, kind of crawl out from under a rock a little bit and actually talk to the media. And I am a very genuine human being. I'm a very honest person when it comes to Terry Pegula. I don't like overall really to criticize Terry Pegula because without him, we wouldn't have these teams, right? We wouldn't have the Buffalo Bills. We wouldn't have the Buffalo Sabres. They'd both be gone if it wasn't for Terry Pegula. I think people really don't understand that at the level that they should. But that doesn't absolve Terry from the mistakes that he's made as the Sabres owner, who look like they're on the right track. Josh Doan just signed a 7-year contract, by the way. Good on Yarmo for locking up Donor. But the Buffalo Bills, on the other hand, were looked at and viewed for so many years as this honorable, classy, respectable football organization. And now I think that has been damaged heavily over the last 72 hours. And maybe they have a chance to recover it with who they decide to hire as the next head coach of this team. And maybe with obviously winning results, nobody will really bat an eyelash over losing Sean McDermott. If the next coach comes in and the Bills win, it's not really what it is. The next Bills head coach, though, has to come in and help this Buffalo Bills team finally get to a Super Bowl that Sean McDermott couldn't lead them to. For whatever reason, he came so close and yet so far in that attempt to get the Bills to a Super Bowl. He just couldn't get them fully there. And if the next head coach does that, nobody will be talking about Sean McDermott anymore. That I feel very confident in. That nobody would ever talk about McDermott really again if the next head coach even leads Buffalo to a Super Bowl, even in a losing effort. I feel like fans at this point, with everything I've read, everything I've heard, fans are just so starved for the Buffalo Bills to just get there. Damn the result. A lot of people my generation, 33, 34, we didn't really remember or get to see those 4 Jim Kelly-led Super Bowls, right? We didn't really get to see that. And we would just love to see them go to one. But then the people that are, 60, 55, 60, my dad's 60 years old. He tells me, he says, you don't want to see the Bills go to a Super Bowl and lose. You don't want to see it. You don't want to see it because he experienced what it was like to see them lose the 4 Super Bowls in a row. But I'm at a point where I need to see Josh Allen in a Super Bowl. That's the point that I'm at. That's where my uh, frustration lies, in terms of this guy going into year 9 at the age of 30. How long can you continue to just beat this drum that is the Sean McDermott drum? And I think that that's a very valid point that I will say Terry Pegula made very well today, is how long can you continue to go with the same coach again and again and again and expect a different result? There's something to that, and that's valid. But a piece of that coach was this general manager that was given a promotion, and I think that that's where people are a little bit confused. How does Sean McDermott get fired, and how does Brandon Beane get a promotion? That's where the confusion lies. But to Terry Pegula, it's very simple. Why did Terry Pegula keep Sean McDermott around? Pegula chooses Beane over McDermott. But why? Well, it's really easy to answer after watching that press conference. It's really easy to answer that question. Why did Terry Pegula choose Beane over McDermott? Well, Josh Allen. Terry Pegula considers the fact that Brandon Beane drafted Josh Allen and went up and made the move to get Josh Allen as the reason that he's still essentially with the team. And is that a very good reason? I think a lot of fans would agree. But then the guys like me, the guys that like to get into the nitty-gritty of every single draft pick, who was picked when and why, how they sold that message to us when they were picked. Brandon Beane has had his fair share of hits. He has had his fair share of misses. Now, I'm going to pull up something for us on Pro Football Reference, which is literally, personally, my favorite site in terms of Buffalo Bills football, anything. Pro Football Reference. Let's pull it up. Let's get it going. So to share this screen here, not sharing the audio, going here, going there, going everywhere. So sharing the screen. Okay. We're going to just look at these last 2 years first and kind of go from there. Okay. Now, there have been several players on this list that I really like. I will say that. Maxwell Hairston, I think, is going to be a solid pro in this league. TJ Sanders, I liked a lot of what I saw from him in the sparing action that we saw it, right? These damn ads. Maxwell Hairston, the Bills didn't really exactly put him in the best position. He got hurt in training camp. He got hurt in the regular season late. TJ Sanders got hurt. Landon Jackson, I raved about him at the combine, and everybody raved about him. But Landon Jackson didn't really put up much statistically in his rookie season. If anything, played 3 games, right? So Deion Walker played 17 games, right? Had a lot of really nice moments as a player, batting down balls, flushing the pocket, flooding it. Jordan Hancock, a lot left to be desired there thus far. Jackson Hawes, I would argue he's probably one of the best run-blocking tight ends in the game right now. Dorian Strong, he got hurt. Didn't look good, right? Chase Lunt, nothing. Caden Prather, nothing. Those picks didn't do much of anything. And obviously 2 years ago, we go with Keon Coleman. Keon has had a very turbulent career in Buffalo in 2 seasons. And Keon was such a massive talking point in this presser Terry Pegula states Coleman was a McDermott choice, not Beane's. I apologize for the typing in the background. It's just I got to make sure that I typed this right. And that I think is crazy. That I think is crazy. Okay. Pegula was stating that Keon Coleman was McDermott's choice, not Beane's. But if in fact Brandon Beane was okay with it, he was okay with it. Brandon Beane wanted to correct him and say, you know what, I signed off on it. I picked him. I was a part of picking him, and that was on me. Okay? I'll take the onus for that. Even though that was the one time of a few times it didn't work out that I didn't or shouldn't have listened to McDermott and the coaching staff, or where I did listen to McDermott and the coaching staff. And I find that to be extremely rich when I remember this pick very well. It was only 2 years ago. Brandon Beane is in a video talking specifically about how he hoped that Keon ran a 4.5 or a 4.6 so that the Buffalo Bills could take him. But, it was Sean McDermott's pick. It was all Sean McDermott. It's very odd what's going on right now. And then they tried to backtrack and try to justify it. Here's the thing with Keon. In my assessment of Keon, I think Keon Coleman has talent. If he didn't have talent, he wouldn't be in the NFL. If he didn't have talent, he wouldn't have been picked in the second round. If he didn't have talent, the Bills wouldn't have trusted him to be this guy that they've needed him to be. But on the flip side of that, he hasn't been that guy that they've needed him to be at all. But why? Well, I think the why has a lot to do with maturity or a lack thereof rather than the talent. I think the lack of maturity is why Keon Coleman's career has been held back. Shopping at the Walton Galleria on the weekends with his girl, spending that money in ways that I think are just, the optics aren't good. And you're free to spend your money however you want, especially when you're making, millions of dollars. But the flash, the moxie hasn't been earned enough to do those things, or at all to do those things. It could be he's got the best quarterback in the game throwing passes to him that he's not quite catching. Right? 67 catches in 2 seasons is terrible. 960 yards in 2 seasons is terrible. 8 touchdowns in 2 seasons is terrible. That's what the numbers state for his career, as you can see. Cole Bishop this season was one of the best picks that the Bills have made in recent years. And Brandon Beane, secondary coach, Sean McDermott, secondary coach with Philadelphia, defensive coordinator in Carolina, knows a lot about the secondary pieces. Drafted Trey White, signed Jordan Poyer, signed Micah Hyde as a part of the staff prior to Brandon Beane coming on board. And I think Cole Bishop was more of a McDermott pick as well that Beane signed off on, and that was a good pick. Dwayne Carter, limited action his rookie season, tears his ACL in his second season. So 3rd round pick that was the pick that they acquired from the trade down from 31 to 33, or 30 to 33, I should say. Maybe 29 to 33, whatever it was. I can't remember. They moved down a few spots, passing on Xavier Worthy, passing on Ladd McConkey so that they could take Keon Coleman. Ray Davis is a player that I like. Cedric Van Pran Granger, I think he's going to play a massive role this upcoming season, probably a starting role, due to the fact that Connor McGovern's probably gone. Unless they get that done somehow, some way, I think Cedric Van Pran Granger is your next center. Edifuan Ulafashio, nothing to speak of. Javon Solomon, kind of a late back-end reserve defensive end. Tylen Grable, same thing. Offensive lineman. Daquan Hardy, nothing. Travis Clayton, really nothing either. Dalton Kincaid is a player that I think the world of. In terms of talent, I think he's got a lot of talent. In terms of the statistics, Dalton Kincaid, his numbers are far better over these last 2-3 years than that, split on average in comparison to Keon Coleman. But are they great? They're not that great. For a first-round pick, top 25 pick, guy that they moved up for as well, I think they expected Dalton Kincaid to hit a lot more than he has. But I think Dalton Kincaid has all the talent to hit. It's just that he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Osiris Torrance, solid. Probably a starter. That's another guy that I think the Bills will try to extend before his contract is up. Dorian Williams, great player, had a neck injury. But you notice a lot of the guys that I'm talking about are defensive players. They have drafted so many defensive players. But where is the offense? Kyer Elam, bust. James Cook, rushing champion. Terrell Bernard, inconsistent. It's one or the other. Like, it's really hard to find two guys that are two studs really in a row. But rather than doing that, I'd like to go back to 2017 because these were the McDermott guys, the Tre'Davious Whites, the Deion Dawkins, the Matt Milanos. Those were the McDermott guys. Josh Allen, Brandon Beane, Tremaine Edmonds, probably mutual. But see what I'm doing here? I'm forced to wonder now what picks were more McDermott, what picks were more Brandon Beane. And I don't want to do that because I don't think that's fair. I think both guys played a pivotal role in the failures and the successes of this team. When we do that, when we start to pit what guy did what against one another, even though I feel like that's what they did, and that's why the separation really happened. It's not good for a fan base to do that. It's really not. It doesn't really do anything to help the situation. So, moving forward, what I took from this press conference was that Terry Pegula is very, very frustrated over the state of the team. He feels that the team should be a Super Bowl team in a Super Bowl. You don't fire Sean McDermott, who's been Mr. Consistent. I said this the other day on my YouTube channel that I'm on right now, that you don't fire a Sean McDermott who has been Mr. Consistent not getting to a Super Bowl, or Mr. Consistent making the playoffs, however you want to look at it. Playoffs. Sean McDermott is a solid coach, and Terry even said that himself. He's a solid coach that you don't just move off of unless you're unsatisfied. And the way Terry Pegula kind of painted the picture of how he felt about the team moments after that Denver Broncos game, it honestly made sense to me. It did. And that portion of it, I can't stop thinking about. I'm not giving Terry the benefit of the doubt. Terry Pegula has done a lot for this team, for this city, right? He's done a lot. But Terry Pegula has also made a lot of mistakes as a sports owner. And I'm talking for both the Bills and the Sabres. He's done a lot for both sides, both franchises, both good in some cases, both bad in other cases. There's been a mix of both. But without him, as I mentioned, they would not be here. And the only benefit of the doubt that I've given Terry is the fact that Kim has had the health issues that she has had. And I got the chance to meet Kim Pegula briefly for about 10, 15 minutes. She was, for all intents and purposes, one of the nicest people I've ever met, especially someone of her stature. She was not intimidating at all. She seemed genuine. She seemed really excited. That was early in the ownership, but I thought she was great when she was in charge of, things with the Sabres and the Bills. I thought she did actually a really good job. Especially, I will say this, especially a woman in the sports industry, it's really hard in those ownership type settings to really stand out. You're kind of prejudged, unfortunately, and not by guys like me. I think a lot of women in sports right now are doing some really good things, whether it's in broadcasting or in the business side of things. And she was one of them. She was a trailblazer. I think for the other trailblazers that have followed her. You know what I mean? And she was inspired by those that were her predecessors, whether they were within the organization or not. Mary Wilson was a big part of the Buffalo Bills under Ralph Wilson for a few years when Ralph Wilson's health was starting to fail. And I think that was really cool how that whole thing transpired. Mary Wilson sells the team to Terry. Terry and his wife are largely in charge of both franchises. And unfortunately, Terry Pegula has had to go through really hell, seeing a spouse, seeing the love of your life go through the situation that she has with her health. I really want to send my empathy to that. And he was asked today, why have you not been so public? Why have you been, kind of in the background? And to paraphrase, he said something like, well, I've had to go through a lot, with my wife and her health and trying to, remedy that situation as best as I can, be there for her, and in some ways be her caretaker and provide her the right care, which is a really tough situation. And it was unforeseen, right? So he understands, I think, the human emotion of this sport, pardon me, football or hockey. He's owned these teams long enough to kind of see the emotions that these players wear on their sleeves, whether they're angry or sad or upset or frustrated but this was different. This emotional response that Josh Allen shared after this loss to the Denver Broncos was unlike anything I've ever seen from an athlete, let alone from an athlete that I've watched so closely. Again, I'm on my back wall here. Uh, since day one, I've never seen Josh Allen react that way ever to anything, let alone to a loss. And I don't want to, what, I will correct myself. The last time I really saw Josh Allen react in a sad way like that was when DeMar Hamlin was dead out on the field, right? We saw him hold his hands over his face and just be completely distraught for obvious reasons. Josh was distraught after this loss. He was really an emotional wreck after this loss. And I understand that kind of shell shock that those players had, because it was once again this scenario, this situation playing itself out. Terry Pegula's in the locker room. He's addressing some of the players. He makes his way down and tries to get to Josh. Josh doesn't really acknowledge that he's there because he can't. There's so much emotion coming out of him. And Terry says, how could I put another year into this? With how things stand, how could I put another year like this together again? And I kind of understood that. That made me think, okay, well, the emotional toll that these losses are taking on these players. Sean McDermott being there the whole time, it's a lot of dents in that door that Sean helped punch, but it's also a lot of dents on the body that these players have taken in this rough, devastating loss after loss after loss. So am I saying that I understand why Terry Pegula fired Sean McDermott? A little bit. Am I saying that he did it the right way? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And, what is the right way? That's what someone could say. What is the right way? Well, this is a business. If an owner puts up the money to become an owner, right? Businessman, I should say, puts up the money to become an owner. They do that. It's their show. That's what a lot of these fans really want to understand, but they never can understand it because the fans don't have the money that an owner has. And I'm talking about myself here. I don't got Pegula bucks. Wish I did, right? We all do. But these 32 owners are so powerful that what they say goes, and they decide they want to fire a coach in today's NFL. You're damn right they're going to fire an NFL head coach, whether he's been there for 19 years in the case of Mike Tomlin, 18 years or however many years it was that John Harbaugh was in Baltimore, or 9 years in the case of Sean McDermott. We are in a transitional period in the National Football League that tenure doesn't really matter anymore. If anything, tenure could work against you if you haven't gotten it done at the level that you need to, in the eyes of your boss and in the eyes of Terry Pegula, the boss of Sean McDermott. He had enough. But he also has not had enough of the draft record of Brandon Beane, which is puzzling because the draft record of Brandon Beane, I would argue, is worse than the coaching of Sean McDermott. Have both been successful? Clearly not successful enough. So to compare apples and oranges and say, well, Beane hasn't been successful in rostering and in putting together this roster for his head coach and Sean McDermott, but Sean McDermott's been more successful in results and wins and losses. But has he? Because they didn't make the Super Bowl. So that's the expectation, though, to my point the other day, that Sean McDermott has helped create. Did he deserve to see it through? Yes. Was he given the chance to see it through? I think so. I think 9 years with Josh Allen is long enough. And that thought kind of just keeps going through my head. The emotions of that loss, Terry questioned whether these players could sign back up for this again under the same coach. And I know this really well. I've learned this really well, I think, these last 2 years since I started coaching at the, youth modified level. You have to get your kids, and in this case, Sean McDermott, you have to get your kids and your players revved up for you, for you. What I mean by that is the things you say and the way you motivate, you have to get a response. And slowly but surely, if that message is received day one, right, and acted upon like it has been with McDermott really since day one, he was able to get these players to listen and focus and understand what trust the process really means, what playoff caliber meant, what championship caliber meant. Even though they didn't get there, they understood what it meant. It's just that over time you fall short of that. It's really hard to sign up for that again and again and again. 9 times is a lot of times. So Terry says, okay, the whole expression of a new voice. I talk to players that I've coached and I say, what type of coach was your last coach? What I want to know, what type of coach was the last coach that you had? Was he, more of a motivator? Was he more of a silent guy? Was he quiet? Because I want to see how different that coach was compared to me. And I want to see where he might have succeeded and also where he might have failed. I'm not going to ask, what made your coach a bad coach? No, every coach has their own strengths and weaknesses and things like that. But I would assume that this new coach of the Buffalo Bills would already understand from afar, being in the league or being outside of the league, just following the sport, you'd already kind of have an understanding of what Sean McDermott was able to do really, really well. He looked at this as a program and he changed it. He changed the program. He changed the dark cloud that was hanging over this team. He brought sunny days, even in the worst of snowstorms, games late in Orchard Park, New York, and even put out, did a snow angel, right? So it's really a sad time for fans because they love Sean McDermott, they respected him, but they also know that he didn't get it done in the 9 years, and they could not get over that hump, whether it was Kansas City or the playoffs. And most of those times, it was Kansas City that they couldn't get past. But some of the times it wasn't. And in 9 years, it was about 50-50. 50% KC, 50% Jacksonville, Houston, Denver, Cincinnati. It's rough. It's really rough to say that he just couldn't get it done. And I think they've put an immense amount of pressure on the new head coach, whoever that is, whether it's Brian Daboll, whether it's Kubiak's kid, whether it's Anthony Lynn, which I don't think that he's going to get the job, or Joe Brady, who they interviewed today. Listen, I have an idea of who I want. In an ideal scenario, if I was running the show, I would try to bring in Bill Belichick. I want a winner. I want somebody that has proven time and time again how to win a championship. And whether we like Bill Belichick or not, as longtime Bills fans, and he was obviously our rival, I do love the idea of Bill Belichick sticking it to the Patriots. And if he's the coach of the Buffalo Bills, what better way to do that? Did Bill Belichick have some bad years towards the end post Tom Brady? Of course he did. Was I shocked that he did? No, he didn't have Tom Brady. He had Cam Newton and Mac Jones. You need to tell me that Josh Allen is worse than those guys? I think not. So I would just love that for the league, for the Bills, for just the scenario of the game. I think it'd be an entertaining storyline, to be quite honest with you. But do I think that's going to happen? I don't. I think they will go with a offensive-minded head coach that has either worked with Allen before or shows the utmost enthusiasm in working with Allen for the first time. Every decision they make is catered around getting Josh Allen as much as they possibly can, whether it's weapons, coaches. I think this is going to be a very offensive forward team, and the defense is going to be left to a veteran coordinator, somebody that has bounced around the league for a really long time. And that's just how I foresee it with what they're looking for, with what I gathered from this press conference. There were moments of this press conference that I cringed. There are moments of this press conference where I didn't hear things that I had ever heard before from an owner or a general manager. Interjecting Terry Pegula, defending, can I step in here? Brandon, can I say this? Could allow me to say, and what's Brandon going to do? He just got a promotion from the guy that he has worked for 8 years, or 9 years, and he's done overall a pretty shitty job these last 4 or 5 years. And I really hold the belief that, maybe for the first, 5 years, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott were in lockstep. Maybe first 6 years, they really tried to make it work. But post the 13 seconds, I think that was the beginning of the end for this regime, including Brandon Beane. I don't have the utmost faith that Brandon Beane is going to be able to get it done for the Buffalo Bills. I wouldn't be shocked if he was gone in a year or two. I look at this as like a 2-year super quick revamp opportunity in the eyes of Terry Pegula. And if it is not done in the form and fashion that Terry wants, he'll fire everybody. He's proven that. He did the same thing with the Sabres. Jason Botterill, he had 3 years in. He fired every scout. He fired every coach, GM, cleaned house. Didn't rehire either. Said, you know what? I'm paying these guys a lot of money to not do a good job, and I'm heading into COVID. Yes, so I'm getting rid of the positions altogether. Now after 6 years, we're starting to see the Sabres rebuild their front office a little bit. And I'm not saying he's going to do that to the Bills, where he'll gut the front office and dissolve positions. I hope not, for the sake of the people working within the organization. But I do think that he is going to be a little impatient because the time is now for Josh Allen to be in a Super Bowl. It should have already happened. Every fan would agree to that. Whether they hear Terry Pegula say that or not, every fan would agree to that. So we'll be waiting, walking on eggshells for who they hire. This hire is the most important hire in the history of the team because they've never had a quarterback like Josh Allen. Say what you want about Jim Kelly, and I told you guys that I really didn't get to experience Jim Kelly, but being the football fanatic that I am, I know enough about Jim Kelly. I know that he came out of the University of Miami, the U. I know that he didn't want to play in Buffalo and didn't play in Buffalo for the first 3 years of his career, playing the USFL for the Houston Gamblers, threw for like 5,000 yards a season. Then his dad says, it's time to play with the big boys. This league's going to fold. Signs a $5 million contract with the Buffalo Bills and revived the franchise, turned the entire franchise around, and was the leader of one of the greatest offenses in NFL history. Hall of Famer, right? But even with all that, I look at players in terms of their skill, in terms of their attributes, rather than what they've accomplished, which always puts Peyton Manning right at number 2 on my all-time quarterback list, ahead of Joe Montana, because I'd rather have the attributes of Peyton Manning than Joe Montana. That's just me. But, man, in terms of skill, in terms of talent, Josh Allen's right at the top among these guys in this era, especially. So that's how I see it. That's how I see it. And it's a real treat of mine to say that we have an opportunity to really have some fun with this hire, potentially. Or we have an opportunity to really hate this hire in time. I hope I grow to love it, whoever it is. I'm not too enamored with some of the names on this roster or slate or list of coaches, but hopefully they prove me wrong. I'm okay with that. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Take care.